Hello everyone, this is Piyush Chaudhary, Assistant Professor, Hansraj College. I welcome you all to the ongoing lecture series on Sudha Murty's Wise and Otherwise, which is a part of the GE Life and Literature. As we all know, the GE Life and Literature is being prescribed in the University of Delhi. There are various texts, there are in total 3 units in this particular GE. Patra Panchali, then we have Tuesdays with Maury, and Sudha Murty's very famous collection of short anecdotes, Wise and Otherwise. So today we'll go on to chapter number 1, anecdote number 1, or perhaps story number 1 by Sudha Murty, and that is chapter number 1, which is titled Honesty Comes from the Heart. Now, chapter number 1, which is the first story, is a story about honesty, as the name itself suggests. It's a story about honesty. In one line, I can say that this story tries to tell us that it is the honesty comes from the heart and not from one's social standing or one's economic standing, right? Honesty and goodwill is not associated with one's economic standing in the society. Rather, honesty comes from a person's own goodwill. So this is, I've tried to just summarize what the entire first chapter describes. So Sudha Murty is basically telling us that honesty is a virtue which comes from within, right? So she is also explaining in the story that honesty cannot be taught, right? And that social status is not a symbol of honesty. There are people who are rich but dishonest. There are people who are poor but extremely honest. And one such example Sudha Murty gives in the very first chapter. Now, Sudha Murty begins this anecdote by describing that she has a great fascination for people who do well in their academic backgrounds, not because it talks about one's intelligence, but also it proves that someone has really worked really hard to excel in a particular field, right? Now, one day in the morning, Sudha Murty finds the newspaper and she looks at the picture of Hanuman Thappa, who is he has secured 8th rank in All India examination. So this boy, Hanuman Thappa, he was a coolie's son. His father was a coolie and he belongs to a tribe and he was extremely poor. Now Sudha Murty expressed her desire to pay for the studies of Hanuman Thappa, and he's very happy, and Sudha Murty, sends him 6 months expenses, which was close to 1800 rupees, right? So she sent him the money draft, but later on one day, Hanuman Thappa returns the money which was not of any use to him, right? And he writes a letter to Sudha Murty which mentions that 1800 will be used for 6 months, but for 2 months his college is closed and therefore he stayed at home during those 2 months and his expenses were just around 300. So he returned that particular amount. He returned 300 rupees back to Sudha Murty. Now, obviously Sudha Murty was not expecting to get the total amount. She was not inspecting. She was not there to inspect how much Hanuman Thappa has used for his studies and how much he has not. Hanuman Thappa could have easily been, he could have easily taken that money and perhaps used for his own enjoyment, because Sudha Murty is not gonna know that Hanuman Thappa has not used these 300 rupees. But look at the honesty of this young boy whose expenses Sudha Murty sponsored. He returns that particular amount of money. So this it shows the sense of honesty that comes from the heart of Hanuman Thappa, right? Sudha Murty is very surprised to know that despite his poverty, he is an honest boy. Now look at these lines which I am quoting now. If you can look at the screen, Sudha Murty says, and I am quoting, "I was taken aback, such poverty and yet such honesty. Hanuman Thappa knew I expected no account of the money sent to him for his monthly expenses, yet he had made it a point to return the balance money. Unbelievable, but true experience has taught me that honesty is not the mark of any particular class, nor is it related to education or wealth. It cannot be taught at any university. It comes naturally from the heart." And this is unquoting. I'm unquoting now. So this quote is the main thrust of this particular story, and perhaps this quote, I can say it's the main thrust of this entire paper, that is GE Life and Literature. Because as students of literature, we tend to understand the various colors of life. We tend to understand that there are different hues of life, there are different colors of life, there are different views in life, there are different perspectives in life. And perhaps reading these anecdotal stories, reading these 51 anecdotes by Sudha Murty, we can get to understand the wisdom that Sudha Murty is trying to provide us with. So one can learn what honesty actually means through this particular short story, right? Through this anecdote. In summary, honesty and goodwill is not associated with good education or one's social status. Rather, it springs from the heart, right? It springs from one's own inner wisdom. That's what Sudha Murty is trying to tell us. So that is anecdote number 1. Let's come to chapter number 2, which is titled On Human Foibles. So this is basically a story about human errors, misjudgment, mistakes, and how people lie, and they use falsehoods to create a false sense of honor and respect, right? So this is the crux of this entire story. So Sudha Murty goes to meet a well-doing person, a well-off person, and he's very proud of the fact that his son, who is just a few years old, but he can narrate and he can narrate things, and he is very intelligent. And he informed Sudha that he has been training the child in academic studies since he was an infant, but the child was just 2 years or maybe perhaps 2.5 years old. So he was boasting about the fact that his hereditary and his genes have played a very vital role. So basically, the idea is that the man who was trying to show off his son's achievement was in fact trying to show off his own achievement, and then he was trying to pass it off as his son's achievement, right? So overall, the father was trying to take the credit for the intelligence of his child in every possible way, right? Then he committed the fatal mistake of trying to show that he was the topper of BVB College of Engineering in Hubli, and perhaps he even mentioned that in 1972 he got the gold medal, and this was his fatal error, because in 1972 it was Sudha Murty who won the gold medal from her college, and she was able to catch his lies, right? And she exposes him, and then what happens is, at the end, the man is simply not able to give any answer, and then Sudha Murty leaves their home. In the end, Sudha Murty asks him, why does he have to lie when he's living a good life, when he's doing a good job? So, I mean, people and humans, they tend to lie for small things, for very small favors. So this is very, unfortunate. And Sudha Murty is trying to say that one must always have this habit of being in a simple mode. One should live in a Zen mode. So this sense of simplicity is what is required, and that is missing. So therefore, the story shows how the parents' obsession with their child's education can be problematic, as it kills the creativity of the child, because he is being forced into academic studies, right? And that too from the very beginning, that too when he's just 1 year old or perhaps 1.5 years old. So a child's creativity get lost in that process. Sudha Murty is also trying to tell us that particular thing, right? It kills the creativity, the critical thinking, the youth of the child, right? The other point that Sudha Murty is trying to make is that people who are doing well in life can also lie at times. So this is the human foibles. The title of the story is On Human Foibles. So this is the human foible, right? So therefore, the lesson that we students of Delhi University, we students of literature, we students who are studying this particular paper, perhaps me myself, the lesson that we get to learn, all of us, is that one must not try to boast of about their achievements, and rather they should stay grounded, they should stay humble, and they should have this penchant for learning more, and they should be kind-hearted as well. So that is story number 2. Let me come now to the third story, which is titled In Sahyadri Hills, A Lesson in Humility. So if I try to summarize, that this entire lesson is about how one must also accept certain things with grace, and that one must always be very humble, right? So Sudha Murty gets this lesson when she visits Sahyadri Hills, where she meets an old man of her tribe. His name is Thandappa, right? So Sudha Murty asks the old man who is the leader of the tribe, and so basically Sudha Murty goes for charity purposes to these tribes to help them, right? And then she offers them some help, and then while coming back, the old man Thandappa, he's the leader of the tribe, and Sudha Murty Thandappa tries to gift Sudha Murty a juice. It was a red liquid, a kind of a juice, because they are poor people, that's all he could afford. Sudha Murty was embarrassed because she thought that she has pressurized these people to give her a return gift, and so she declined it very politely, because she felt that these people are so poor, and how can she accept gifts from such poor people who themselves are struggling to eat. So she refuses it very politely, but the old man then says that they will not be able to take the charity gifts, the charity that Sudha Murty is giving, and that he's the one who teaches Sudha Murty this vital lesson, that there is a grace in taking and receiving gifts also. So the leader refuses to accept the donations and says that one must give something to take something in return. So this is the lesson in humility that Sudha Murty is getting. So Sudha Murty was very shocked to know that, here is an old man. Uh, and look at these lines that I'm quoting now, as you can see on the screen. She says, here in the Sahyadri forest was an old man, a tribal with no schooling, practicing a highly principled philosophy of life. Give when you take, do not take without giving. This was culture at its best. I smiled and gracefully accepted his gift. Unquote. So the lines that you just saw on the screen shows that this is the lesson that Sudha Murty has received, and this is the title of the story, and that she learns that there is a grace in accepting gifts also. So this is the third beautiful story, a very beautiful story, a very heartwarming story by Sudha Murty, and it tells us that good values can be practiced even without money and even without one being very rich. So it comes from the heart again. So story number 1 and 3 are very similar in that sense. Now comes story number 4, which is titled Death Without Grief. After the last heartwarming story, this particular story, Death Without Grief, takes on a serious matter. Right. So Sudha Murty once is informed that someone in her neighborhood has died. So she wanted to visit the family to offer her condolences. So she tries to go, to find some time and then go to the family. But then she realizes that the particular family where the death has occurred, there is no sense of remorse, or perhaps I would say not remorse, but there is no sense of, grief going on. And it does not look like a house of mourning. So she is very confused. She meets the family, she meets the man, she meets the woman, and then they just talk about all the things, and then later on finally they strike the conversation, and Sudha Murty gets to know that the mother of the man, that is the mother-in-law of the wife, so she has expired, but there is no sense of grief amongst the children, amongst the even the son, and amongst the daughter-in-law. Right. So earlier she believed that she might have entered the wrong home, but then she realizes that the death has occurred, but she's very she's amazed to know that there is no sense of grief. So it's a death without a grief. So finally the man, he said that his mother, she is no more. She died very recently, but then there was a prolonged sense of illness, and she was on bed. She was bedridden, and she was completely bedridden for a extended period of time. It was a terminal illness, and now finally she has passed away. So the man said that the death of the mother has solved all the problems for us, because now his mother was also relieved of the pain and the suffering that she was having. Then even the daughter-in-law, the wife of the man, she says that it is good that the old woman has finally died, because now because her life was full of problems, and they had to take care of the ailing mother, and therefore they are also relieved of the duties. So after this episode, Sudha Murty comes home. She does not know what to feel. She is upset to know that even their own son, they were not at all looking upset. So basically, she says that nowadays our lives have become so entangled and so busy that even emotions like death, like mourning, like loss, they have more or less lost their significance, right? So look at these lines that I'm quoting. Have our lives become so busy that grief has become proportionate to the usefulness of the loved ones we have lost? So this is a very thought-provoking statement. But Sudha Murty wants us to realize that in this fast-paced world, in this cosmopolitan world, where materialism triumphs, where you can say where materialism triumphs, people have lost all sense of belonging, all sense of love and sensitivity. People have lost the sense of care. Everything is proportionate to usefulness in life. But the readers must be aware that Sudha Murty is not endorsing such views for the for herself. So she is offering a critical view of all these aspects. She mentions that the death of the bedridden mother came as a death, but without grief. Right? So it was rather relief, not grief, that was induced due to the death of the mother. So rather the whole family, they are very content about it, that the mother has departed. But all this story, this particular story makes us reflect on the human character, on humans. What makes us human if there is death without grief? Does it make us human, or does it make us inhuman? So Sudha Murty wants us to think about this issue. So this is story number 4. Next up, we have story number 5, which is titled The Mop Count Did Not Tally. So this is a story about doctors in an operation theater, with a senior trained surgeon and a junior newly recruited intern. So in one line, if I try to summarize it in one line, the story talks about how one must have faith on themselves, and one must have faith on their knowledge, and one must stick to their basics that they have received while training. So the story opens in the operation theatre where a young nurse who is just 22 years old has been asked to assist a very popular and a very senior and a very reputed surgeon. And then, she gives those cotton mops, but then when the surgeon is about to finish, so he asks for the, scissors and for the catgut, and but then the nurse refuses to give it because the mop count did not tally. So the rule is that whenever a surgeon is operating, whenever a surgery is being done, so to ensure that some vital, material has not been left inside the patient's body, so they count the number of cottons before the surgery, and then they count the number of cottons after the surgery. And if the mop count, the cotton mop, so if the mop count tallies, then they proceed for the final, step of the surgery, and that is stitching up the wound. So here the mop count was not tallying. So what the surgeon did was, the surgeon was in a hurry, and therefore he was trying to pressurize the young nurse to give him the, cottons, but she refused to do that because she believed that, she has not been able to tally it. The doctor threatened to kick her out of the job because he was getting angry. The senior doctor was getting impatient, and he was getting angry, but unless the tally was completed, the nurse refused to give the catgut and to give the, needles, right? And then all of a sudden, despite being in such huge pressure by such a senior member, and despite her job being in danger, the nurse stuck to the basics, and then finally she was able to look at the mop count at the right time, and then she passes on the catgut and the needles, to the doctor. So the doctor is amazed to know that despite being in such pressure, she did the right thing. So later on, he talks to her and he asks her that despite, the extreme pressure, why did you not break under the pressure? So she said that she was on extreme pressure due to her angry boss, but she stuck to the basics. She decided to stick to the basics that her teachers taught her earlier on, right? So this was the story, and the lesson that we get to know from this is that, Sudha Murty's father used to teach her this particular story to give the lesson that one must stick to the basics, and one must be, they should realize the fact that the knowledge that they receive from their teachers is good, and that they should have faith on the teacher, and also they should have faith on the learning that they received, and also they should have faith on what? On basically the education that they have received, and also on themselves. So the nurse had faith on all of these things, and that is why, despite being under such huge pressure, she did not crumble, and therefore also earned the adulation and the respect of the surgeon, right? So she kept a very calm head under pressure. So this is chapter number 5. With this, I come to this end of this lecture. So as you know, I took 5 stories, in this particular lecture. There are 51 stories in total, and in multiples of 5, I'll be taking up each and every story till the end story. So we'll be having some 10 or 12 odd lectures on this entire short story and the anecdotal collection by Sudha Murty, which is titled Wise and Otherwise. I hope this particular lecture comprehensively tried to cover all the aspects, and it also added some real value to the students. Thank you so much for joining in with me. Thank you so much for tuning in at Hansraj e-Samvaad. I'll see you very soon with the next 5 topics, and that is chapter number 6 till chapter number 10 in the subsequent lectures. Please stay tuned with me for more lectures. Thank you so much. Have a great day.